Okay, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, this is a very popular conversation topic since we've moved out of COVID. What does the future of work look like? Are we going to retain work from home using these kind of online platforms to engage with our workers, or are we going to return back to perhaps a more traditional working landscape, right? This was an idea that was brought up yesterday in some of the conference discussions, and we're going to be revisiting today with our panel of experts. So joining us today for our second panel discussion of day 2 of the Seek Better Career Fair, we have Chung Chao Dong, who is the co-founder of One Good Card. We have Kate Sullivan, Global Head of Services and Talent at the British Council. We have Ruchika Kaul, founder and principal consultant of Metis Talent Management. And this session will be moderated by Daniel Pei, Director of Sales, Job Street Singapore. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving them a very warm welcome to the stage.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us this morning. So close to some 4 years ago, the world was really struck by one of the worst ever pandemics. As a result, almost everyone was forced to adapt either a remote or a hybrid working model, something a lot of us has never thought of prior to the pandemic. So today, after having experienced hybrid working, it has progressively become a new norm for a lot of companies. So how has the post-pandemic world shaped the way we think about the way we work today? What are some of the pros and cons, challenges and benefits of hybrid working, and whether or not the hybrid working model is here to stay? So these are just some of the questions that we'll be answering today. So good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel, Sales Director of Job Street Singapore. I'm personally very privileged and honored to have with me today 3 distinguished panelists, and we will be discussing about this topic. So before we start the discussion, maybe we will just have everyone introduce themselves, starting with you, Ruchika.
Hi, my name is Ruchika Kaul. I'm the founder of Metis. Metis has been around for about 10 years, and we work with leadership teams, helping them think through issues like the one we're discussing today. I've had previous experiences in consulting with Aon, Towers, and also, I've been told to keep my mic close to my chin and not very good at following instructions, which is why I decided to become a consultant. I have, so leadership roles in companies like Hilton, private equity company called Xander, and then 10 years doing my own thing. So that's me.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kate from British Council. A lot of you might know British Council. Maybe people have been to our English classes, perhaps. But we do much more than that. We're in over 100 countries, and we are the United Kingdom's organisation for cultural relations and educational opportunities. And I work as the global head of corporate solutions. We do training and assessment for working professionals, and I work with 28 different countries. I work mostly remotely, mostly because when I go to the office, I tend to talk too much and get no work done at all.
Hello and good morning to everyone. My name is Chao Dong, and I'm the founder of One Good Card. So we provide smart alternative to traditional paper business cards. We allow businesses as well as individuals to connect more effectively. And right now, today, we have a team of 20. And I think for this panelist, I bring a SME/startup perspective to this panelist, and I'm looking forward to share more about our experiences today.
Thank you, panelists, for really taking the time out of a busy schedule to be with us today on a Sunday morning, that is. So, we're going to get on with our first question of this session, and I'm going to pose the question to each of you. So, when workplaces adopted hybrid working, and that was during the COVID-19 pandemic, how was it really received by employees and you as the employers alike? So perhaps we can start with Ruchika.
So I think when we went totally remote, it was hardest on me. I'm a people person. I get my energy from being around people. So it was really, really hard for me. I think it was easier for my team because they were like, okay, bye, don't need to see you anymore. But I think the harder thing for us was how do we engage with clients? Like a lot of things that we do are in person. So we had to find new ways of engaging with clients. A couple of our team members left. We had to rethink of the skill sets that we want to get on board. We needed more people who could manage things on their own, who could hit the ground running. We couldn't do a lot of hand-holding as we usually used to do when new people used to come on board. So we kind of had to rethink what's that profile of employee I want if things are going to be so remote. So those were some of our key challenges.
What about Kate?
Thanks. It's interesting there, Ruchika. I'm completely opposite from you. So I was already working remotely before the pandemic because mostly communicating with people in different countries. And I had the experience and I'd grown the skills to succeed in hybrid working. So for me, I was just delighted because I had more flexibility, I didn't have to commute, I could save time. So for me, it worked really well. But I think for some of our teams who'd not experienced remote working before, they were really scared because they didn't have the skills to be able to succeed in remote working. Plus, there was the pressure of sustaining the business during COVID. So they actually had more work to do with less skills and really had to upskill quickly. And I think that was a challenge.
Ciao.
All right. So I think I'm with Ruchika on this one. Sorry, Kate. So for us, I forgot to mention earlier, we are working in a hybrid arrangement. And personally, and I think across my team as well, we're all agreeable that hybrid arrangement is very positive for us. It allows more room for us to breathe. And for us in particular, being in a startup environment, the pacing can be rather fast at times. Collaboration is important. Productivity is important as well, and speed is also really important. And more often than not, being in a startup mentality, it is very often we have that hustle or that grind mindset, and in the long run, it can be pretty damaging to each individual. And that's why I think the beauty of balancing out with hybrid work is really important. It gives everyone a little bit more breathing room where they can distinguish. This is work. This is a little bit of my personal life as well. And I think that's why hybrid works really well for us in particular. And I'm still a big fan of it, by the way.
Thank you. I think there was a combination of a difference in terms of the attitude towards hybrid working. But that was during the COVID-19 pandemic. Fast forward to today, how has really the attitude towards hybrid working model changed? And how is the British Council dealing with it, Kate?
Thanks, Daniel. As I mentioned at the start of the pandemic, people were a bit nervous. Perhaps they didn't feel they had the skills or the experience. But working remotely, they say necessity is the mother of invention. And people had to do it. They had no choice. So they had to really upskill themselves quickly and learn how to use digital tools that perhaps they were not familiar with before. They had to work on developing virtual communication, collaboration, that time management, work-life balance. So people had to do it. And by the end of the pandemic, people preferred that method of working. And I was reading a survey recently which was saying that 78% of job seekers in Singapore will go for a job which offers hybrid working over one that doesn't. So from an employee standpoint, I think it's very positive. I think it's what people want. They appreciate the flexibility, the extra work-life balance, and they enjoy the benefits of hybrid. However, we've seen a lot of employers now moving more back towards on-site. And I noticed that there was a survey in May which was saying that only 6.6% of job vacants in Singapore mentioned remote or work from home. So you've got this 78% of job seekers applying for the 6.6% of jobs. So there's a kind of mismatch there between the expectations of employers and the expectations of the employees. So I think that employers have to adopt hybrid to give some flexibility. But what does that mean? And for many organizations, you see in the news recently, Amazon and even Zoom are now making their employees come back into the office, but they're still kind of trying to figure out exactly what hybrid means. How many days a week? Is it fixed days, for example? And the second part of the question about the British Council, we've also always been very much in favour of hybrid and flexible working. It really fits with our core value of equal opportunities and diversity. It also helps us make efficient use of our resources. So we definitely offer hybrid and remote working. Of course, not every role is suitable for that, so it is on a case-by-case basis, agreed with the manager and with the HR, but we are very flexible. So if you're one of those 78% applying for the 6.6% of jobs, come work with us.
Yeah, that's it. That's a totally interesting thing where we have progressively a lot more candidates and job seekers looking at hybrid working as one of the mandatory, not just a good to have, but rather a mandatory ask from companies. And hopefully a lot more companies will be able to adopt a hybrid working model as we go along. Now, let's turn our attention towards more of the employers, right? So we talk about the challenges faced by employers towards a hybrid mode of working. What are some of the challenges Metis faced, and how did you overcome that?
Okay, so we're a small firm. It's easy for us to collaborate even if we're remote or we're in person. So let me share a little bit about what our clients said. We work for some large law firms in Singapore. We work for a large hospitality group. We work for design and architectural firms. And the problem for everybody is very similar, right? People, it's not about productivity anymore. So in 2021, 2022, clients were saying, oh, if people are working from home, how do I measure productivity? So that became, monitor people on Slack, totally not effective, creates a really bad culture. But that was the main question. But today, the main question for leaders is, if people work in a hybrid model or if they're remote, how do I create my culture? Right? How do I get them to feel like I'm working for my firm? So if you are an employee sitting on the other side, which I assume some of you are, I want you to just think about that with that lens, right? So when they're saying come back to work, a little bit more hybrid, what they really want is be part of my culture. Be part of my culture, help me create a learning organization. I'm hiring you for skill sets, but how do I grow you? You're joining as a young executive today. You are my potential manager tomorrow. How do I grow you if you are not going to come into office? If you're not going to sit with senior leaders and learn from them, how do I create that capability? Maybe we will have that capability in 10 years of creating cultures totally remotely and learning organizations totally remotely. But unfortunately, 99% of organizations haven't figured that out yet. So they're going to say to you, come back. So it's not about managers trying to keep an eye on you. It's really the need to grow their people, grow the culture, which I think is the driving questions for leadership teams today. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and perhaps I know if I could follow up a little bit on that. We talk about being a hybrid working model, and some companies are mandating a certain number of days a week to come back. How do you really sort of decide how many days is considered enough?
Oh, so this is again a super big question that everybody's asking, because Gallup did a study in 2022, and they found that nearly 70% of employees are saying that they want some flexibility of going back into work, right? So I should be able to go to work when I want to. But here's the thing, everybody wants to go to work when I want to. So I might go on Monday, and you might go on a Thursday, and I go to an empty office, and you also go to an empty office. And then after 3 weeks, nobody's going to turn up. So the other big question now is, can we mandate days? And I think the sweet spot is about 2 days. Some companies are saying 1 to 2, some companies are saying 2 to 3. And the bigger challenge for companies is to make those 2 days purposeful. So when you go in for 2 days, you should really feel like there was value in my coming here, like there was something that could not be done remotely. Because if I'm going to come into the office and I'm sitting on my computer, I'm doing exactly what I could have done at home, I don't want to come in. Like, this is stupid. right? So for lack of a better word. So I don't want to come in. So it is on the organizations now to make your time in the office feel purposeful. You know, the culture, the L&D that they speak about, we want to build, they need to demonstrate to you that in your days in, they are doing that. They're helping you integrate with the culture. They're creating learning opportunities. And I think when we meet that challenge, then people are going to be comfortable. Like, yeah, you want me to come in a couple of days a week? I know why, and it makes sense and works for my career, makes me feel part of the company, so I will.
Yeah, and it's a good point. And you know, as we know it, a lot of people have different perception in terms of how many days should be enough. So that makes it very, very difficult from an employer standpoint to satisfy everybody. So maybe we will turn again our attention back to the employees, and which is most of you here. I'm going to ask Charles this question. What about hybrid mode of working that really attracts employees in One Good Card? And what were some of these challenges?
Okay, so I think to share a little bit more about how we operate, right? I think for Ruchika, she brought up that a lot of companies, they usually practice about 1 or 2 days or 2 to 3 days. And for us right now, typically we are around in the office about 2 to 3 days in a week. And the point about having purposeful interactions, purposeful work being done in the office is really important. So the question is, why are we in the office for the 2 to 3 days, right? So typically, that 2 to 3 days for us is where a lot of collaboration happens. That's typically where all our stand-ins happen, or our weekly or monthly meeting occurs. And I believe that is quite a common practice nowadays within the different offices as well. So every other day that we are not required to go through that process, likely you will be either working at home or working in a cafe or something like that. And anyway, sorry to sidetrack. Back to the question. I think for us, we have these hybrid arrangements since day one, and it's been really positive. For some context, we didn't really have much of a choice. We started in 2020, so it was the height of the lockdown, and everything was remote at the point of time. So when we transitioned out, naturally you become a work from home arrangement. So we didn't have a lot of choice to begin with in the first place. Anyways, there's a lot of positive plus points when it comes to our current arrangement. Why we kept to it still to this very day is because the productivity is still high. There's a good sense of work-life balance as well. Everyone is generally pretty happy with the arrangement. And personally, I think one thing that I feel that is a big plus when it comes to this arrangement is how it promotes certain sense of shared trust as well as responsibility between the employers and employees. So I think that's one of those things where we don't really talk about first. But the truth is, when you're put in a hybrid situation or even a remote situation, you need a lot of discipline. You need a lot of self-motivation and a lot of accountability to be able to carry out your work effectively. And I think that is the good thing about having these arrangements, is that it promotes, it breeds that level of trust as well as accountability between the managers and the executives. And well, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. And on the flip side, there are some downsides to having a hybrid arrangement. We had it for quite a while now, since day one. And I think the biggest challenge for us is sometimes communication is not the best. Like there might be communication gaps that happen. And for some instance, when we speak to people physically, you're able to see their face, their emotions. You're able to read the room. You get a better sensing of how to approach people, how to approach them with intent or deliver certain messages. And virtually, through Slack or through Microsoft Teams, it's a lot more challenging to deliver the emotional aspect of the message. And I think that is where the big problem lies when it comes to a hybrid arrangement. Yeah, and perhaps another issue that we can talk about is the working environment. The truth is, not everyone has a very conducive home working environment. Some do, some don't. And how often, when we go into a call, right, we have somebody, on the other side of the call go like, sorry, don't mind the background, it's a bit noisy. This kind of things happens. And I think that is a little bit more towards the negative things that happen when you're working away from the office. Now, the truth is, there are no bans, there is no worse working arrangement. Ultimately, it's about the fit. Everyone works well in different arrangements. So, for example, for some of for the three of us, we work well in different arrangements. And I think being a job seeker, the important thing is understanding which of these arrangement works best for you and not for the company. Okay, so sorry, I digress. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think probably a lot of employees would have different perceptions in terms of whether or not they should go back to office. I should have the right to work from home, But it's always good to have a mixture of both. If I want to work from home, I have the flexibility too, and if I want to go back to the office because there are too much distractions at home, I still have the freedom to do so. So, yeah.
Sorry. I think it's really interesting what you said there. I think that as an individual, it's important that you know yourself. What's important to you? Is hybrid like a deal breaker? And when you're looking for a job and you're talking today to some of these organizations, ask them. Like sometimes we're really scared because we think that they have the power and we just are trying to sell ourselves, if you know what I mean, when you're looking for a job. But you've got to be clear what's important to you. So for me, I will not apply for a job if it's fully on-site. Like, absolutely not. And some organizations are still not open about that in the recruitment process. But don't be afraid to ask them. It's not like they have the power. It's a two-way street, because if you go into an organization and hybrid is really important to you, but it's on-site, and you're not going to be happy there. And perhaps you're not going to perform either. So it won't suit the organization and it won't suit you. So ask. And be clear about what you mean about hybrid. Do you want fixed days in the office? Do you want informal hybrid? Do you want remote? And if you have that clear in your own mind, I think it will help you to navigate the recruitment and the application process a lot better.
Hey, and let me ask the question now and probably throw the question to the floor. Now, any one of you over here would apply to a job that requires you to be fully on-site, i.e., there is no flexibility for hybrid working. How many of you over here? You would. So we still have a few that prefers in-person, but majority of you would say, okay, flexibility is a must.
But if I can answer that, I think it depends on the role. If somebody said to me, here's this exciting role for you, but you know what, it's all in person, I'd go all out, right? But if somebody said, oh, well, here are 3 roles, they're all the same, one has flexibility, one doesn't, it becomes a different question.
Exactly.
But for an exciting opportunity, I'd do it.
So it's going to be a good debate for this topic. Now, finally, relating to today's topic, do you think hybrid working is here to stay? And would this really be the new norm in the future? So maybe Kate, you like to start first?
Sure. The short answer is yes to the question. I think that, as we know, a lot of employees, definitely they're looking for some flexibility nowadays. And the war for talent really is still real. And as employers, if we want to attract the best talent, we have to offer that flexibility. Particularly we see as Gen Z entering the workplace, by the end of this decade, they're going to make up almost 60% of our workforces. And a lot of those people have sort of grown up during COVID, and they have the skills to work remotely. And so I think yes. And also tech is evolving so much that it will give us, opportunities. You mentioned like you can't necessarily understand somebody's emotions. I think going forward, the technology will help us to do that better and to better communicate in remote settings. So my short answer is yes.
Ruchika, what about you?
I think yes. I think there'll always be some jobs that have to be done in person. I am not going to a doctor and have him totally diagnose me without checking me out. I think some jobs will be in person, but I think a lot of jobs will have... I think we were already going towards flexibility before COVID. Now we call it hybrid. So it's going to be hybrid in my views. I think technology will become better. We will find better ways to collaborate. I think companies will definitely find a way to create a culture in hybrid models. That's what they're not doing very well today. So here to stay, but not for everyone.
Yeah, um, I think hybrid arrangement will be a good option to have moving forward. Will it become the new norm? I think it depends on the industry, like I once said. Importantly is keeping the option open and being flexible. And if there's one thing that the pandemic has taught us is that, I think we talked about it earlier, it works, right? This arrangement, it works. But then again, the one thing that it showed us is that, it also doesn't work in certain cases. And ultimately, I think for job seekers in particular, which one works best for you is important. And as Kate brought up, there's nothing wrong with asking employers what are the arrangements that you have, and I think that's really important. For me personally, I think I'm a bit more closer to Chika. I think I thrive a little bit better in human-to-human interaction. So personally, I think a work-from-home arrangement, a hybrid arrangement is better. So I get a little bit of a best of the both worlds. Well, compared to full remote, I think I might not do the best in that. So at the end of the day, we have to be very realistic that certain industries, certain sectors, or certain job scopes are just not suited for hybrid arrangement. We don't want doctors diagnosing you without being actually there, or manufacturing industries or service industries in particular. I think that's where it's really challenging. So yeah, and all in all, I think it's really important for the individuals to really understand which form of working arrangement works the best for them. And nowadays, companies are a lot more open to, negotiating certain aspects of this. And I think job seekers should, fight for that to see which one works best for you, but with reasonable sense that, not all job can do that.
Yeah, and those are great insights, and a lot of companies are already starting to realize that hybrid working is really the way to go. And either thanks or no thanks to the pandemic that kind of forced us to explore that as an option. We're gonna kind of just open the mic to the floor. If any of you have any questions that you would like to ask any of our panelists, that's the time to do so. Do we have any questions? Don't be shy. Any burning questions in mind? No? It's expected. But that's fine. I think perhaps we could kind of really use the remaining time and talk about the fact that we have seen this in news, right? That there are still companies who insist on really getting their employees back to the office that don't believe the concept of hybrid working, and what are your thoughts on that, and what would you say to these companies? It's free flow, so maybe you can start off.
I'm happy to start. I think they're being a little lazy. I think if a job can be done remotely, they're asking you to come back because they haven't figured out how to build a company around a flexible work arrangement, right? So I think that's a little bit of lazy leadership. So I would say to them, get your act together and get on board with how the world is thinking. But yeah, if you run a hospital, I understand. If you're running an F&B service, I understand. But if a job is remote capable, and I think we have to be clear about that definition, right? If the job is remote capable, then figure out a way and make it happen.
Yeah, and I think a lot of companies do have these issues of juggling between that, team bonding, the building of cohesiveness amongst team. Hence, they want them to come back to the office, and employees want that flexibility to be able to work from home. So, how do companies then, be able to juggle between this?
So, purposeful days. So, we've been working with a few leadership teams, and I keep saying to them, purposeful days. Don't call people back just because you have the power to call people back. The day people are back in office, they should have purpose. So do your collaboration, your learning days, your town halls, do them in person, right? But don't just force people to come back for the sake of it. And that's really the key, right? You should feel like I'm going and there is a point to my going. Not a big believer in totally remote work as well. I mean, there's a study done recently. People who totally work remotely, have more mental health challenges for a couple of reasons. We don't know how to switch off if we're working remotely, right? We just keep working, which we found in COVID, or I'll do an errand in the middle of the day and then I feel guilty I did an errand, so in the evening I keep working. So the days kind of become longer, and there's no interaction. There's no switching off from work and getting to home. There's no switching off from home and getting to work. And that can be really, really challenging for our mental health. So I think both things for me are not okay anymore, like totally remote, challenging, especially for your mental health, totally on-site, unnecessary, lots of commute time, unnecessary in my head. So sweet spot again is 2 days, make them purposeful, build your company, build your culture, teach people, use them as learning days. And that's probably the solution.
Right. And Chow, any thoughts on that?
I 100% agree with what Ruchika said. For us, like I said, we preach about having a hybrid arrangement since day one. And I think there are some challenges when it comes to building culture, especially among our remote workers. So we do have certain employees that are working overseas, so they're 100% remote. And I think building their culture amongst them can be a little bit more challenging. And I think at the end of the day, it really boils down to the leadership, their perspective towards hybrid arrangements. And for me, strong proponent. I love hybrid arrangement. I get to work, productively, and I get freedom as well to do my things. And I think that is one thing that people nowadays really, really treasure a lot about. And if you want me to go back to fully in person, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want that. And definitely, I wouldn't want that for my team as well. And so ultimately, it boils down to your leadership team and how they perceive the benefits or the cons of having different arrangements. And once again, it doesn't work for everyone. So it's important to just understand that which one works the best for you. I think for me, I found a sweet spot and I like it. I'll stick to it.
Yeah, I'd add on there. I like what you say about it is about the organizational culture. And, we've worked with many organizations that don't want to go back to remote. But then I would say to them, how are you going to win the war for talent in this case? So you need to think about your organizational culture. And like you said, Chow, it's got to start from the top. The leaders have got to walk the talk in terms of hybrid, but also they've got to empower the managers, because often day to day it's the managers that have those interactions with their team members. So they need to be upskilled and have learning so that they can really lead their teams and develop the skills in their teams to collaborate, to communicate, to develop that hybrid working culture. And it is possible. It's not easy, but it is possible.
Okay. In this case, we have come to really the end of the panel discussion, but any final words from any of the panelists to probably job seekers?
I think I just want to repeat two things that I said. One is don't be afraid of asking during the recruitment. And two, when you're doing your CV, you're doing your applications, if that's what you want, make sure that you highlight that you've got the skills. So don't just be putting, communication skills. Be specific. Say, I've got skills in virtual communication, remote communication. And that makes you a more attractive candidate for that 6.6% of jobs that are out there.
Anything from you?
My last one would be make your days in office purposeful. If your organization is not doing that, you do that, right? So you go in, you make sure the days that you're in office, you're meeting people, you're networking, you're connecting, you're learning, you're talking to people that you would not talk to on Zoom. Because the career is your responsibility in today's times. It's no longer the responsibility of your organization. It's your responsibility. So by making those connections, you're making your own career happen. So make the days in office purposeful.
And some parting words from me, I would say, find the best fit for you. And I think nowadays we all treasure the flexibility a lot more now that we have a taste of it. And if you think that there is something that works really well for you and that you can't give up, like me, then stick to it. It works the best for you. You can make some compromises in other aspects, other factors when it comes to your job search, But importantly, find the one that best fits you.
All right, we've come to the end of the panel discussion. We hope you've gained really some valuable insights about the topic. Please continue to stay on for our next panel discussion. And of course, to our panelists, Ruchika, Kate, and Chow, thank you so much again, once again, for being here. Really appreciate it. Oh, yes, there is a question.
Yeah, just want to ask, speaking of time spent in the office, there are some people who do overtime OT, yeah, and they don't get paid for the OT. So if let's say I'm not paid for doing overtime, what should I do? How do I fight for my rights to be paid? Or is there any way to not do OT? Or what is your advice?
So this is a sort of like a regulatory question of sort in that sense. I think in Singapore there are certain regulations regulating this over time, and there are certain thresholds in which you or employers would have to pay overtime if they require you to do overtime. So probably this is something that you would need to bring up to human resources and HR, and if not, then they should be able to advise you in terms of what you can do.
So the one thing, if I may answer, so one thing I've found is the MOM hotline is very, very useful for questions. Call them. You don't have to, every time you speak to them, you don't have to say, oh, I'm calling because I want to file a complaint, right? You can call them and say, what's your advice? Is there a law around this? Because if you're in a managerial role, very likely you may not be totally covered under that law because they assume that it's managerial responsibilities, right? So they will help you understand what's the legal framework for what you're doing. They're pretty good at giving you advice without you having to say, this is the company and this is my problem. So I would encourage you to just talk to them.
Yeah, but do talk to your human resource department for that. All right. Thank you so much once again, for being here today. Such a wonderful audience. Do stay back for our next panel discussion. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chow Dong, Kate, Ruchika, and David. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you are just outside the stage area, please make your way in for our next talk. We have a few people coming in now. So just one more time, if you are just outside the stage area in the far right-hand corner of the expo, please make your way in for our next talk. This is going to be about a topic that came up yesterday as well, making a career switch. And we're going to explore a few case studies there.